Good morning, everybody, and we are here in the Samuel Shields Sanctuary. It is Wednesday, I wrote it down, Wednesday, February 12th. It is Erev Tu B'Shavat, and we are here together with our learners and our colleagues to do our Talmud class. I wanted to just begin with two little stories. Actually, I've been told by many people that I spend too much time telling stories, so I'm going to spend some time telling stories this morning. So the first story I want to say is I was talking to my brother yesterday, the one that lives in New Jersey, and he was saying that he had been in Israel about 10 years ago, and it was Tu B'Shvat. So the day before Tu B'Shvat, he's in this little courtyard, and there's an almond tree, and there's just nothing there. And then he wakes up in the morning and looks up on the exact day of Tu B'Shvat, and there are blossoms on the almond tree, Hashkedi Parachet. It was just amazing that on that exact day, the almond trees started to bloom. So I thought that was a really pretty cool story. Okay, so this morning I want to begin with a story about why I chose this topic. The topic that we're going to talk about is the idea of if only. And the reason I got this idea has to do with our senior rabbi, Wes Gardenswartz, who always goes to a movie or out to dinner or is out walking or is at a play or something like that. And there's something that's totally non sequitur about that and what might make a great sermon or a great Devar Torah. So I was out with this friend. We were sitting having coffee and some pastry. And we were just talking about the vagaries of life, how things go on and on and on. And then we're saying, but if only this and if only that. And then we realized, and then I said to myself, that's not a good snap, but that's the best I can do. If only, that's a great idea for a topic. If only certain things didn't happen in our lives. If only certain things did or didn't happen in the trajectory of the story of the Jewish people, so I want to explore some of those things. And here's the first story that I want to talk about. So this is anyone know this movie? Well, I'm going to ask you guys. Do you know this movie called Big Fish? It's an old movie, and it's a great movie. It's about a rather buttoned up, rather wealthy lawyer that lives in New York, and he visits his father. His father is from a very small town and tells these stories about his life, which are incredibly insane. They're things that could not possibly have happened. And he gets sort of tired of his dad, who's now getting old. And he says, but then his dad gets ill, and he leaves New York and goes to this small town. And then his father, who is not doing well, all of a sudden, all these people that his father talked about were showing up. His father talked about circus people, like a person that was 11 feet tall and a person that was 2 feet tall. And the son just didn't believe any of these people existed. And then suddenly, these people are showing up, and he starts to believe that the stories of his father's life, which actually influenced the way he lived his life, were actually true. So it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. And I was thinking about that in terms of a personal story I have, which people have not believed for a long time. This was when I was probably about, it's got to be a long time ago, maybe 40 years ago, 45 years ago. I was working at a prominent kosher deli in Brookline, and I was on my way to work. Oh, good guess. I was on my way to work, and
I ate there a few times.
Did you actually?
And I miss that place.
Did you like the
Great
pastrami?
pastrami sandwich.
The pastrami, that was excellent. Yes, I always wondered about the hand-cut pastrami. I tried to cut it like this with my hand; it never worked. Anyway, so I'm on my way to work. I'm riding my bicycle, and I would cut through a little pathway that went between two buildings. And on the way, I hear somebody calling for help. And I stop my bike and I look up, and on the third story, there's a woman who's standing outside on the ledge. She's standing outside on the ledge. Her hands, she was cleaning her windows, and her hands got trapped between the two parts of the window. So I put my bike down, and this is the part that you're not going to believe. I shimmied up between the two buildings to the third floor and tried my best to pry apart the window so she could get her hands out. Now, I was.
You are Spider-Man.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. And I was there for maybe 20, 25 minutes. Finally, somebody else saw us. They called the fire department. They came with the ladder. They were able to extricate this woman's hands. And then afterwards, she was very, of course, very grateful, because otherwise she would have been out there God knows how long. But she said, I'm a professional guitarist. And they said, had she been stuck maybe 10 minutes longer, she might have lost mobility with her fingers. Anyway, so this is the kind of story, like if I hadn't stopped, if only I had taken a different path to work that day because I was late for work as it was, and now I'm like 45 minutes to an hour late, then that woman's life would have been much different.
So, short story, and then we should thank God for the gift of Torah.
Yes, thank you.
It reminds me so much, and all these stories that we heard about people who missed the train and they didn't get in time to the Twin Towers, for work,
Missed their flight,
and missed their flight, and they were saved by a miracle.
Right.
So should we do the blessings?
Yes, let's begin
All
our
right.
blessings.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה, וערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו בצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחרבנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
So thinking about if only, I have two stories. One of them, thank you for Rabbi Michelle Robinson, who found this story about one of our most inspiring leaders of the Jewish world in the 20th and 21st century, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. And this is a great story. So, Michelle, would you read this? Unfortunately, the bottom of the last page is cut off a little bit, but I can say what those words are when you get there. So just read the highlighted parts.
Starting with I came to America?
Yes.
I came to America to meet great rabbis of the day. And every one of them, every single Rav, rabbinical leader I met in America said, you must see the Rebbe. You must see the Rebbe. So I went to Eastern Parkway 770 and I came in. I said to the first chassid I met, I'd like to speak with the Rebbe, please. He fell about laughing. He said, do you know how many thousands of people are waiting to see the Rebbe? Forget it. I said, well, I'm traveling around America. Here's the phone number of my aunt in Los Angeles, and if it's possible, phone me. Weeks later, I was in Los Angeles. Come Motzei Shabbat, the phone went. It was Chabad. The Rebbe will see you on Thursday. Do you want me to skip? I had no money in those days, and all I had was a Greyhound bus ticket. If you've ever ridden from Los Angeles to New York on a Greyhound bus, 72 hours nonstop, I sat on this bus. I came to 770, and eventually the moment came when I was ushered into the Rebbe's study. I asked him all my intellectual, philosophical questions. He gave intellectual, philosophical answers. And then he did what no one else had done. He did a role reversal. He started asking me questions. How many Jewish students are in Cambridge? How many get involved in Jewish life? What are you doing to bring other people in? Now, I hadn't come to be a shaliach, Chabad Lubavitcher emissary. I had come to ask a few simple questions, and all of a sudden he was challenging me. So I did the English thing. The English can construct sentences like nobody else, They can construct more complex excuses for doing nothing than anyone else on earth. His words, not ours. So I started the sentence in the situation in which I find myself. And the Rebbe did something which I think was quite unusual for him. He actually stopped me in mid-sentence. He says, nobody finds themselves in a situation. You put yourself in a situation. And if you put yourself in that situation, you can put yourself in another situation.
And the part that's cut off says, and that changed my life. So that is a great story because, if only Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who was not really looking to be a rabbi or an emissary or whatever, decided that he's in Los Angeles. The Rebbe will see you now. He has to take a bus for 72 hours. Nah, I don't think I want to do that. I mean, I want to see the Rebbe, but that might be too much to do that. So let's open it up. Anyone want to have any thoughts about that?
So this is one of my favorite if stories, because you really can imagine so many people whose lives were transformed by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who never would have had that opportunity. What the Rebbe was asking, Rebbe was so amazing in creating leaders who create leaders, and that's really what he did in that moment. I think the question of if only, though, sometimes there are if only questions, which are like the one you raised, Elias, like you're randomly missing your bus or getting a flat tire or something else that you can't control. What strikes me about the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs story is that he actually takes up the invitation. He has some agency and some action that really drives his future. And so I think that fleshes out a second level of if only. There are some if onlys that we'll never know about. Mm-hmm. There are other if onlys that we really have control over in our lives.
Well, and the Rebbe, it's so interesting, that statement. You don't find yourself in a situation. You place yourself in a situation. The Rebbe really undermines the whole concept of if only. His is life is conscious choice. You make a series of conscious choices. There's no if only. You might think that there is coincidence, but it's all your agency and your choice, and you should make different choices.
Yeah, or if you find yourself in a situation, you still have, no matter where you are, no matter what you have found yourself facing, you have the opportunity to shift and change or simply engage with that situation differently.
Yeah, but I mean, two things come to mind. All of us at some point in our lives ask ourselves, if only, all right? Did I make the right decision? All right. Was the right decision for me to come to America? Was the right decision to come to Temple Emmanuel? Of course it was, but anyways,
yes.
I have to say it. No, but so many of us ask questions like, what if I would have stayed in Argentina? I would have spent more time with my parents, things like that. Mm-hmm. But then the point is, you cannot dwell on what decisions that, you've made and if only. Because, first of all, you don't live the present, you don't live the future, because you are constantly questioning and hammering yourself. I should have done this differently. I should have done this in a different way, and there is no use of that.
Okay. Well, so there's another story that's almost exactly the same, and this is from Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who I believe was the head of the Reform movement at some point. I think he spoke here actually at one point at Temple Emmanuel. I'm going to read this next section because sadly, again, my copying skills didn't work out particularly well. I apologize about that. So Rabbi Rick Jacobs said, so I start with a story. Before I was a rabbi, I was thinking about going to rabbinical school, but I wasn't really sure. It's kind of a big step. So a friend of mine said, well, Rick, why don't you come to HUC-JR, Reform Rabbinical Seminary in Los Angeles, and check it out. Come with me to a class. So I did. So I went to this class, and the teacher was Rabbi Harold Schulweis. Going on to the next page, Rabbi Harold Schulweis, who was an adjunct professor then, and I got to say, these were 90 minutes that were unbelievably stirring. His teaching were relevant, urgent, compelling, and I walked out of Rabbi Schulweis's class feeling like, yeah, all right, sign me up. I'm in. So another very similar story. Elisa, would you read the next little section, please?
And then I was in my first year of rabbinical school at HUC in Israel. That's where you spend your first year when you're studying to be a Reform rabbi. I saw Rabbi Schulweis. He had a big congregational group, and I waited to see if I could just sneak in and get a word in. And he saw me. He clearly couldn't have recognized me. I only sat in his class for 90 minutes. But I went up to him and I said, thank you. He said, what for? I said, I'm thanking you because I sat in your Talmud class in Los Angeles last year. And it was so gripping that here I am spending my first year of HUC in Israel. And he got a big smile on his face. And I bet you a lot of people told Rabbi Schulweis exactly what I had told him. But I wanted him to know. And I want to share, actually, a sermon that Rabbi Schulweis gave.
Okay, so this is again another similar story where if Rick Jacobs had said, okay, maybe if I don't go to this visit my friend at HUC, it's no big deal, right? But this is one of these cases where if Rabbi Schulweis was not as welcoming, he's leading this gigantic group of congregants, and someone seems randomly coming up to him and talking to him, he might have said, I'm sorry, I'm busy now. So the fact that he took the time and got this big smile, I think, was actually very significant as well. So it's a very similar story where the choice of if this and that, then it changes the trajectory of someone's life. It's interesting that they found another story after Michelle told me the first story about Jonathan Sachs, that found another story about the person who became the head of the Reform movement. So it goes all directions. I want to continue with the next section. Elias, can you read the next highlighted sections on this page, where it says I wanted to talk about? So this is the sermon that.
Where are you exactly?
So this is the.
I wanted to talk about not one verse. I
Right.
actually want to talk about one word. So the word that I want to focus on this is the word that Rabbi Schulweis gave the entire sermon on in 1997. It's echad. It means one. And it is traditional when you say Shema to elongate that word echad, really savoring and holding on. What does that mean, that God is one? Well, you could argue, and Rabbi Schulweis does it pretty compellingly, that being one, echad, is the spiritual foundation of kind of everything that we are and everything that our tradition means. It's all in that word one. Here's again the theology. It's not just about what do I believe, but Rabbi Schulweis makes this case that when I actually really believe and understand and internalize that God is one, it changed the way I live. It changed the way I look at the world, the way I look at the people, and what I do every day.
Yeah, so thank you. So that's, again, this is like by thinking about bringing this particular text, is that that if he had not listened to Rabbi Schulweis's sermon, then his understanding of what echad means, I think, would be not as deep as it came to be for Rabbi Jacobs. Well, yeah. Anyone? All right. So we're going to go on to
Torah with Maury.
Yes, Torah with Maury, number 12. Okay.
I actually happen to like this text.
Okay.
It's short and no.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting because this is the one text that I felt like clanged out of the other stories, which were very much embracing about a what if. But we'll get there after you read it.
Yeah, no, yeah.
All right.
Go ahead, yeah.
Lalisa, do you want to read or you're fine?
Go for it. You
Okay,
like it,
thank you.
so.
How can we ever truly enjoy something when we know that all things will pass? Ever encounter this rather depressing problem? Nothing ever lasts. We look forward to occasions and events. They come, we enjoy them, and then when they are over, we feel like they happen way too fast. Time moves quickly, and we never can hold on to any experience, except in memories. Ask an older person how quickly life has flown by. And then, when it's all over, when our memories of the past exceed our dreams for the future, we die. Beautiful, I'm optimistic. Morris Schwartz articulated a response to this problem. If you accept the fact that you can die at any time when you may not be as ambitious as you are, the things you spend so much time on, all this work you do, might not seem as important. You might have to make room for some more spiritual things. As has often been pointed out, no one ever lies on his deathbed wishing he spent more time on the office.
So this is the one, Dan, that I felt like the if only, and while there's certainly, I mean, Maury Schwartz was a gadol of thinking about what really matters in life. And I do not mean to disagree with him, except for that I think to paint such a broad stroke of all people at all times, because I actually have met many people who, when they find out they have a terminal illness, actually what they want to do is spend more time doing the holy work. That, a doctor who says, I want to finish my research that I have been doing to add to this world, or somebody who is a therapist who says, I want to make sure my patients are in a good place, or somebody who's in a business and says, I want to make sure that my business is actually working to help and to heal and to make it to set up for that next generation who's coming to take over, or simply somebody who's maybe even an artist who says, like, I have more creativity, I have more work in me that I want to bring into this world. So I think while the question is such an important question, right, when you find out you only have a little bit of time left, that question of, can I run the two stories in my head of if only I take this path or that path, I think is such a powerful and important question. And I'm not sure that no one ever goes to his deathbed wishing that they had spent more time in the office is correct.
This is a topic that we discussed many times, this idea that some people say, okay, I need to stop working because I want to enjoy more life. And they do it, and some people are fine with that. Some people say, I retire too early, because I missed my work and I don't know what to do with my time, And in our case, to me, working here is very rewarding. And I know that even if I'm in Bermuda in a cruise for a year, I'm going to be missing here, So it's always trying to find that thin balance, and people are very different from each other. Some people thrive, only working. Some people thrive only having leisure time, and also a mix of them.
Yeah.
So
and
this generalization is something that I agree with you is perhaps too big.
Yeah, I would say also, Elias, earlier you said that that it's also not good to dwell on the past of decisions that you made earlier, but to move in the moment that the path that you've also taken.
And I think in terms of those if onlys, like you think about, if only Adam and Chava had not eaten from that first tree, right? Like we as humans would live in the Garden of Eden still. And then you think, well, but wait a minute, then there wouldn't be a story, right? There are some ways in which our life is shaped by those if onlys, not only as a negative, but also as an opportunity to decide what the story of our life is going to be.
Right. Thank you. Elisa, would you read the next one? I think I like this one, actually.
We were sitting on the sidewalk right in front of our apartment building, our clothes dirty, our hands covered in colored chalk. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment of being filthy, of sitting on the floor, of coloring and laughing with my children. I wanted more, but as always, I pulled myself in another direction. Time to get up, time to eat dinner, time to take a bath, time to go to sleep. But children, time to play? Maybe tomorrow there's no more time today. In the Jerusalem Talmud, Kiddushin, it says, when a person will stand in judgment before God after he or she leaves this world, they will have to give a din v'cheshbon, a reckoning for anything that they had the opportunity to taste yet didn't taste. Hours after my children went to sleep the day we played with chalk, I couldn't help thinking to myself, Elana, these moments with your children, you have to savor them now. If not, you will look back and be held accountable for missing them. You will so wish that you had them back and regret that you didn't appreciate them. This is the season. Do we take enough time to look into our children's eyes, to touch their hand, to really talk? Do we worry and seek out to find about what is going on in their hearts and their souls? In 1 minute, when I finish this phone call, let me just clean up and I'll be right with you. The problem is that 1 minute is never just 1 minute, and that the 1 minute might be a minute too late. In Hebrew, the word for time, zman, has the same root as the word to invite, leazmin, or an invitation, hazmanah. If only we could take the same amount of time, getting to know and enjoying our children as we would for an important guest. I shudder to think what would happen in the future if we don't make that time now. Will they ever invite me into their lives, into their hearts? Will they trust me and confide in me, turning to me when they need me? Or will they run to someone else because I'm always too busy? I simply don't have the time. But that's not true. If it is a priority, I will make the time. Thank you, God, for allowing me to live and have this time, this precious moment that I will never get back.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this, Michelle, what you just said, this kind of runs counter to that idea. The idea that a person is saying simultaneously, yes, I have a career. Yes, I have important phone calls. Yes, I have important guests. On the other hand, if only I had, as they get older, say they reach like an age like mine, and they say, if only I had taken the time to really listen to my children when they were growing up, maybe our relationship now would be better. Maybe our families, so it's always, again, it's what
That-
Elia said also. So it's just that choice in how to live, and not regret it, but sometimes it's the choices that you make. If only I had done this or done that or not done this, maybe my life would be better at the moment, at the stage in my life that I'm in now.
Yeah, Dan. I mean, look, this reflection is indisputable, right? This isn't about the choices you make outside. This is about when I'm with the people who matter to me. Am I paying attention to the people who matter to me? I was looking at one of these internet memes that shows, parents at a restaurant with a kid in the 1970s, and the parents at the table with the children, and the children are doing, moving around the cups, and the parent is moving around the cups, and they're kind of connecting. And then you see a parent at a restaurant table today, and I'm, certainly as guilty as anybody else of this. And, everyone at the table is looking at their screen. Right. So the question is, are we present when we are present? And that's an indisputable, beautiful point that all of us can pay more attention to. And I'm very curious about Eliza's response to this, because at 3 a.m. with Eder, right, when he wakes up, how do you feel about somebody who says to you, don't miss a moment?
And I just when he wakes up at 3, I just think, wow. There's no if only. I'm just so happy.
I was telling the story yesterday. I don't know who was, or to Andrew, and I was telling that when Mikey was a baby and a toddler, he, sometimes he would cry in the middle of the night. So the best solution for me was to bring my mother-in-law into town, and my mother-in-law will sleep on the basement, and I will sleep, with Lorena and Mikey and upstairs. So at one point I couldn't take it anymore, so I will normally go down, and I said, Susanna, your turn. And I would switch beds with her, so I will go down sleeping, and she will take care of the baby. And always the excuse was, I have to wake up so early tomorrow. I have this important service I have to sing,
But that provided her with her own opportunity to not miss those 3 a.m. moments.
Exactly.
And that's a real kindness that you were able to provide. Dan, the question that I'm sitting with, because there's no argument, right? There are lots of different possibilities in every different moment, but I'm curious what you want us to get from this. What is the process of doing this if only thinking? What does it do for us? What should I take away? Because, okay, great, there are lots of different possibilities. I could wake up at 3 a.m. with Eder and be present for him, or I could be like, sleep training starts now, go back to sleep, I'm going back to bed. And who knows where those choices will lead us. But what do you want us to get from this?
I would say, I think that what I hope that we'll all get from this is the idea that life is lived in the now, as Elias was saying also, but also that that sometimes our choices are dependent on things outside of our control. And so it becomes more complex and more difficult to make choices that you can sometimes live with, and sometimes will color the way that you live your life day to day. So
also the takeaway for me is, regarding what you are asking, Alisa, is that many times when we are questioning ourselves, all right, we tend sooner or later to compare ourselves with somebody else. Okay, maybe if I should have done this different, I could have been like this person or that person or something like that. And what is interesting to find, you tend to be more lonely when you think about that way, because you are victimizing yourself that you made the bad choice, or situations that are uncomfortable for you. but everybody struggles in a different way with different things. And in a way, you can easily say we are all in the same boat. So my takeaway is that, everybody at some point of their life, they are struggling with something. And yes, what is a little hard for me to see then here is the connection about, if only, which means you are asking yourself some different things, and the connection about the stories of the rabbis that got inspired by other people. I'm struggling a little bit to see that connection because they are different things. One is somebody who was like an important figure that, it was a life-changing moment for you, but another thing is sometimes it's like your own decisions that you make that, perhaps are not the best.
Well, and just to amplify that, it's totally possible they could have become the same rabbis even without those experiences. They cite those experiences having been transformative, but it's not clear, especially in these stories, it's not clear what exactly happened for them in that moment that changed the trajectory of their lives.
Right. And in addition, what could have been something if I only is once they were rabbis, if they choose the right shul for them or not. So many times we see that there is not a right fit for rabbis and cantors to go to some congregation. After 2-3 years or 5 years, they leave, they go somewhere else. So if only, that's the question that happens there.
Yeah, to me the connection's a little clearer because you're thinking of it, I think, more in the abstract. Like if we were looking at this person's story and we didn't see that moment, would that next moment have happened? And I think so much about the pandemic in this way. How different you see the life paths that so many people would have been on had it not happened versus when it's happening, especially with our kids. And sometimes it's one moment, sometimes it's many moments, but I think that the question itself that I'm interested in is you have all these Torah texts here. How does that then can we connect the Torah text into the if only paradigm?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Let's turn to some of the Torah texts. So I have first Noach. The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. When God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh he had corrupted its ways on earth, God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. I'm about to destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. And then continuing, God says, for my part, I'm about to bring the flood waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh under the sky, in which there is breath of life. Everything on earth shall perish. Noah did so, just as God commanded him, so he did. So I was thinking, like, okay, and you said earlier, Michelle, if things didn't go the way that they went, then there wouldn't be a story. But I'm thinking, like, okay, so what if Noah was more like Abraham? What if Noah said, you can't do that. You can't destroy the whole world. Let's try to figure out a plan that might work better. So again, if only Noah had acted in a certain way, how would our story as a people change? So, or on the other hand, if we look at Abraham, Avraham. So what if Avraham had not argued with God? Said, in the story of Sodom and Amorah, what if Abraham said, okay, fine. So how would that have changed the trajectory of the way that we became a Jewish people? So I'm thinking about if only in terms of those kind of Torah texts.
Then what does that? I'm still stuck. What does that do for you? Okay, if only Noah might have died in the flood, or might not have died, or he might have let other people survive, or Abraham. Like, what does that do for you, Dad? Like, where do you go from there?
The direction I go is that our life stories, as we are as a people and as individuals and families, is oftentimes based on not based on things that are outside of our control. And if only we had done this or not done that, how would our lives have been different? And sometimes that would have been, it may have been better for us if we had made a different choice.
Yeah, I think that's such an important question, Dan. And yet there is this interplay here, especially in the text, of both a thing that you have no control over and a thing that you have a lot of control over. And how do you know we know in retrospect, and the rabbis spend a lot of time talking about, Noah as a righteous man in his generation, but if he had been more like Abraham, I mean, we spend a lot of time spinning our wheels like that, but the story we have is the story we have. And in that sense, I feel like the first story that you brought about the Rebbe coming in and saying, like, no, you don't find yourself in a situation, you have some agency here, might be an important lens through which to see each of these moments when we're not sure whether I'm being acted upon or I can act.
The other thing that comes up for me is that when do you think about if only? Usually it's in a moment of regret. When you had a conversation, if only I had just stood up for myself and said this thing, if only I had made a different choice, if only I had bought a different car, bought a different house, if only, I should have gotten that inspected. Like, if only being a cue to, I took the wrong path, and had I not, my life would have been different. I'm not sure that you do that when you're really happy
Well,
about
Yeah,
things.
although the
but it
two
goes back-
stories
it
he
goes-
brought.
No. Most of the time, I think you may be right now. But what I said before, not always they are associated with things that you regret, because, suppose in the case that I just mentioned before, 24 years ago when 9/11 happened, that person is saying, thank God. Thank God I wasn't there. Thank God I missed that bus. Thank God, there was a traffic jam. So in terms of your own personal, self-examination, that could be the answer. But when we think about why I ended up there, sometimes it's like miracles, happening all over.
So that leads to the question is if only a good statement for us to be making, or is it a negative statement for us to be making? Is it some of both? I mean, how do we understand the concept of if only? And, what do you hope the teaching that we would take with us into our lives that might change our behavior from here on out?
I also just say it rubs me that like the if only takes away agency. That Rebbe's statement about like it's not you if you don't find yourself in a place, you put yourself in a place, and there's not an if only. Like you made that choice, like you made that decision, whatever the reasons were. No, but like really and truly. And I don't see how does it serve to be like, oh, if only.
Well,
Well,
but
yeah,
that's
I
an
heard-
important statement about if only, right? If only is helpful if it serves us to either appreciate something, if, thank God, if only I had not missed that bus, or maybe if only that hadn't happened, what can I do now?
Yes,
Maybe.
I heard many times Wes in sermons, I don't know if he came up with this idea of somebody else said it, this idea that life is not what happens to you, it's what do you do about it, Right. So it more reinforces more what you are saying. You put yourself in that situation for whatever reason, for a miracle or for your own personal decisions, and then deal with it.
And longing after a possibility doesn't help. Like fundamentally, the more time you spend wishing that if only things had been different, or if only it
And
takes
one thing we can do, we are sure in life, is you cannot change the past.
No, you can't. No,
Although
no.
there's such an interesting and sort of generative question there. If only there's actually a cartoon Marvel series called What If, where they imagine the stories of the characters we know. Like, what if Thor had been an only child? Like, how could you imagine the story of their lives really playing out? And I think, in some sense, maybe that question is not helpful in terms of regret, but is perhaps helpful in terms of creativity.
For
Like,
sure, but
what
that's a
other
different thing because
options?
your what if story generates a whole other universe of possibility, and you're using that what if only
To stretch.
and to expand. But in your own life, when you say if only, it's rarely to stretch. It's usually to say like, well, if only I had made this choice, but I didn't, so here I am stuck.
You remind me that years ago I started watching a TV show that I don't recall the name of it, but it was about if Hitler had won.
Yeah.
All right. If Hitler had won, and America will be a Nazi regime, and every world, will be a Nazi regime, and will be who knows where, you know. So
Yeah, on a more uplifting note.
Be more
Right.
down than
No,
that.
I think about Purim, that we're coming into the story of, and we are for our theme for Purim doing Wicked. And Wicked is a whole reimagining of the story of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz from a very different perspectives, and ask us what takeaways, what can we learn from this story that pushes us beyond the over the rainbow kind of one-dimensional
somewhere.
ideas, to really think deeply about the questions and the challenges. And I'm excited to do Wicked on Purim, and I think it's really important that the what if question invites us to a creativity, to stretch ourselves, to think about what is the whole universe or multiverse of possibilities that we can even now still try to achieve.
Yeah, and my takeaway note, thank you then for bringing this topic, is that although I don't see how we can get away from if only, okay, because everybody questions, as I said before, that all the time, that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. So I'm grateful that you brought these topics to the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, colleagues, for this really interesting conversation, and thank you for challenging me in terms of my my topic and presentation. I really enjoyed the conversation, and we hope to see you on this coming Shabbat with a special Shabbat service starting at 10 o'clock, and also we can't wait to see you on Purim as well. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom,
Shalom.
everybody.
Shkosh, Dan.